I think as someone who's founded several companies before, both some of which have failed and some of which have succeeded, to have a kind of blueprint available and being surrounded by like-minded founders, especially the leadership team, guys who've built, scaled, bootstrapped, and exited at scale multiple times, that gives me the energy to keep building. And having a framework here where we can work in pods, where I get assigned someone who's a tech lead and a GTM lead, experts that, let's say I want to work on B2C, or if the idea I will have has is B2B instead, there's always going to be someone at that right stage. So you kind of build this assembly line of ideas, and it's a no BS ecosystem as well. At least my experience has been that in terms of dealing with other founders and other entrepreneurs here. So that's been a very, very eye-opening experience. Even for someone who's built before, I really like the venture studio model. It gives you the best of both worlds. That hustle, but also that backup from others. That is a community that can support you. It changed from the beginning until now, right? So at the beginning, I was ideating, I was coming up with an idea that I think would be fit for Disrupt. I came up with a bunch of them and I tried to validate them. So at the very beginning, it's pretty chaotic until you have, despite there being an existing framework, you can't help but have it be chaotic. You do a lot of customer interviews to see, okay, the idea I have, is it valid? You prototype it on your own, because at the beginning, you're supposed to do everything yourself before you're assigned resources. So a week back then was very different than a week now. And once you zone in or begin to sculpt something that you have that is like clearer, I began validating. When I started validating, I did calls with potential customers, experts, and you validate whether this idea has a market or not. Today, I've been live with our MVP for the past 6 days, so we just got approved, and we had an IC earlier last month. Now it's just a pedal to the metal. Getting clients. I think we're kicking off with our first client today, potentially as a design partner for 2 weeks. I'm working with Munam, who's our or my tech lead rather, and we're getting a new GTM lead that I'm going to fly to Karachi to meet in person. So it's pretty exciting and pretty fast. I think the name Disrupt is pretty suitable. I think the structure and the framework that's there in place, and the venture team that holds you accountable to the entire building process. Now, the building process is not there to limit you as a founder, but is there to ensure that we kill ideas fast enough if they don't make sense, ego put aside, or to help you build something that could potentially become a unicorn. Because as a startup, it's at an embryonic stage. Everything might destroy the idea. So you want to have the right metrics in place. You want to have the right um, um, challenges, or people challenge you with the right information in place so that it's not just an echo chamber between you and yourself. And I like that. I've got it wrong a few times, and burned some money doing that, and burned my fingers doing that actually. So I think there's an assumption at the very early stages that you get this euphoria that you have an aha moment, and your mind starts racing, and you think you're the first to have created something so amazing. But go so much with your vision and ignore the sentiment from the market or from potential customers. A lot of people start building before they actually talk to anybody. So I'm obsessed with talking to people. In fact, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to share my screen just for 1 second to actually
Absolutely.
check this out. So what I've done is I reach out to, these are all people that I've reached out to. It also says tried booking a demo, because I'm pitching 10 demo to them. So what I'm doing is I go like, hey, I went to your website. This is the landing page. This is the demo page. It sucks. Let me help you. So I've gone through all of these people, and I think it's so important to just talk to people before you build something. I'm excited about building, but it's a challenge to balance those two things out. We underestimate the complexity of getting that first client. Specifically that first client, that cold start problem. How do you get the first one, the first 10? Because you're basically selling something that's more or less broken. If you try 10 demo today, again, it's been live for just 6 days, there's a likelihood it might hallucinate. But there's also a much bigger likelihood that within the next 2 weeks to a month, after consistent testing with people, it's going to be one of the most robust platforms out there in comparison to existing players. So I think the biggest thing is to chat with the target audience and understand their problem as opposed to pitch them a solution. Take a deep breath before you celebrate. Make sure that things make sense. I have a habit as Walid and Masa. You're gonna see this. I can't control it. I like to celebrate. I like to. Uh, some people have said I'm temperamental when they did their due diligence on me, but I could be all over the place sometimes. And having a method that grounds you could be very, very, very useful. That's not to say that being temperamental doesn't work. It made me fundraise. It made me find amazing co-founders and have some of the most interesting places I've put myself in. Um, so it makes it exciting, but I don't think that's always the best way to go about being a wild card like that. When I say myself, so I'll explain what kind of person I am. I think it's someone who's had several startups before, or at least one startup. And having a failed startup is a blessing because you know what not to do, right? I think if not a founder, someone who's worked in an early stage company before where they handled multiple confusing responsibilities. So someone who thrives in chaos because you're going to be thrown into the deep end, expected with an expectation, pardon, that you're going to know what needs to be done. And often you don't. You just figure it out. And there's a fine line between that being a science and an art. I'm not onto the matcha, Pilates, journaling ice bath thing. I've tried ice baths, but to be honest with you, I think they're doing it right and I'm doing it wrong because I've burnt out on several occasions, and I've got a baby coming in next month, so I think that's
Oh,
going to be exciting.
wow.
Yeah, I need.
Congrats.
Thanks. It's a
Actually,
baby
so
girl.
I think the biohacking for you then.
Yeah, so I need to get into biohacking. I'm going to ask you, Sanya, what's the best thing to do? My wife made me take some supplements. That's the I'm really interested in how AI could take a role in automating things that previously software as a service would do. I'm interested in seeing how service as a software becomes. So, for example, a recent post by YC had some of the partners saying they think that agencies, whether it's marketing, law, accounting, etc., could become the next unicorns if they automate their offerings and sell it to people at SaaS margins. So your fixed costs are significantly less. I don't know how that would work, but I'm effectively doing it with 10 demo where I'm quote unquote automating the sales development, the SDR role at the pre-sales point. But that's something super exciting to me. Really like the ability to have space for unfettered building where I'm given, there are boundaries, valid boundaries, but beyond that, I'm given trust and autonomy to build. And I love that. I've learned so much by meeting people like Ilian, who's our CTO, Jonathan. There's just a bunch of really switched on people. And I think that that's an educational thing for me to keep in mind, guys. I haven't had a boss since 2016, 2017. So it's an interesting dynamic as well. And it's humbling to kind of report to someone and understand how you could do that. I think that's a very interesting thing to have. To be fair, in a venture builder, you've got all of the risk on you, right? And in a VC model, you can give advice, but you're not really the one who's in the standing in. Correct, exactly, in front of like the firing squad. So that immediately makes it inherently different. I would say that the venture studio model is a nice transition for people between being a full-time founder on your own and being someone who would be like a venture, an EIR in a venture capital firm, because you still have autonomy, you still have choices. There is some regulation, but the impact you have is much bigger than being someone who gives advice or supports existing startups. Wow. Okay. Now that's probably my favorite question. But I have to think about it. The hardest decision I had to make at Disrupt as an EIR, probably, I'll tell you, and it's the hardest decision, but it's a good decision, which was to follow a framework or a process or trust a process that is not inherently mine, that I would do on my own, and put that ego aside and follow a process that's there and humbly learn from it, because the process that I have here, I've learned from. Process typically is you've got ideation and validation. Once you've hit validation, you draft a memo, which you present to the leadership team. Once
Mm.
that's presented to them, there's an investor committee. The IC is typically 5 people. Um,
Mhm.
and if they all unanimously agree, then an MVP starts and you're given some kind of amount of funding nominal that goes between money you could spend on the business and money that is given to as resources,
Mm.
whether it's your tech lead or the pods or things like that. After enough time where you hit certain KPIs and kill gates are not like
Mm.
are passed,
Mm.
you can fundraise a larger portion and it spins out into its own company.